Welcome to Zero Knowledge. I'm your host, Anna Rose. In this podcast, we will be exploring the latest in zero-knowledge research and the decentralized web, as well as new paradigms that promise to change the way we interact and transact online. This week, I chat with Sean Bowe. Sean is a Zcash core developer and the lead on Tachyon. We talk about the evolving technical roadmap of Zcash, what has happened in the Zcash community since we last spoke in 2020, the evolution and eventual implementation of Halo in their system, and how learnings over these years have led to the design of Tachion, the upcoming shielded pool upgrade that he is leading development on. We then dive into the details of Tachion, discussing the cryptography under the hood, the changes it aims to make, and how this interfaces with existing user experience and wallets. We also touch on Zcash governance, wallet UX, and where Sean sees Zcash going. Just a note, this episode was recorded at the start of January, right before the major news about the ECC employees leaving to start a new company, so we didn't get a chance to discuss that development. It's a pretty major shift in the community, and so I just wanted to make a note about why that was not mentioned. This episode also includes a bonus segment, which we will be sharing exclusively with ZK Mesh Plus subscribers. In case you haven't heard yet, ZK Mesh Plus is our new unified subscription space, bringing together the Zero Knowledge Podcast, ZK Hack, our events, our newsletters, and other initiatives we produce across the ecosystem. ZK Mesh Plus subscribers will get access to bonus podcast segments, early access and discounts for events, subscriber-only content, including the State of ZK report, which comes out this week, and its addendums. This podcast and the ZK Mesh newsletter that we release every month will still remain free, but we created ZK Mesh Plus to give those who want to support the show a way to do so and to help us build this ecosystem sustainably for the long term. So if you'd like to support the show, if you'd like to also get all of this cool extra bonus content, please head over to the ZK Mesh Substack, linked in the show notes, and subscribe to get access to ZK Mesh Plus. So here is my episode with Sean Bowe, all about Zcash and Tachyon. Today, I'm here with Sean Bowe. Sean is a Zcash core developer who's working on Tachyon. Welcome to the show, Sean.
It's a pleasure to be here again.
Yes, I should say welcome back. We checked it out. You've been on 2 episodes of the ZK podcast in the past. One was actually episode 76. This is like an episode I cite often. I don't know if you know this. I have often mentioned it on other shows. In that episode, we did kind of a debrief on the Zcash bug. You were kind of telling the story of finding a vulnerability that no one else had found and needing to fix it on this live system. I found that story really compelling. I remember you also saying something like, this is kind of cathartic.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a therapy session, for sure.
I really like that one. So we'll add the link to that. And the second one was all about Halo, where we had you on with Dara Emma, and that was Halo 1. This recorded back in 2020. I did another episode later with Dara Emma and Strad, where we covered Halo 2. Our episode was really like the intro to this idea that you had discovered back in 2020. So both of those, I mean, we're talking, 7 years ago and then 5 years ago. What's happened since?
Wow. Well, I can't believe it's been that long.
It's a big catch-up.
So definitely a lot's happened in the Zcash ecosystem.
Yeah.
A lot has happened in the academic literature surrounding some of this stuff we were talking about in the last episodes.
For sure.
Definitely a lot's happened in my life. So I spent about 9 years at the Electric Coin Company, which is the company that founded Zcash. Some of the core developers are still there, and they're responsible for a big bulk of the engineering and protocol development work that happens right now. So I spent about 9 years there, and last year I left. Actually, it's not last year anymore. It's
2024.
Oh no,
left.
time is going by even faster. And since then, I did not leave Zcash at all. In fact, the whole point of me leaving ECC was to give me a chance to just focus specifically on the things that I wanted to work on with Zcash, which is what I've been doing, which from the outset has been doing scaling research and crypto research that I'm interested in. While ECC has gone on to do great things over the last year and a half, especially with their mobile wallet and stuff like that. And
Zashi,
yeah.
Zashi, yeah. So I actually wanted to ask you if you had anything, if you worked on that in any way, or was that like a project that actually happened after you had left?
Well, the guts of Zashi had been developed for years, more or less. The mobile apps were kind of shoddy and prototype-ish for a long time. We definitely had a mobile wallet that we used we treated it like a dog food wallet that basically to subject ourselves with the user experience of our own protocol. And
What was it called?
we actually called it a dog food wallet internally. And I think it was
Okay.
some builds of it was called that, but it was called, I can't remember what the wallet was called, but then we rebranded it as Zashi, and development on that was going on for a while. And then after that, I left. But before then, a lot of the engineering that went into Zashi was actually just a lot of it was written in Rust. And then the Zashi, the user experience and the app itself, it's a great team that Josh Swihart put together to develop that. They made a really fantastic wallet and uses all the crazy crypto that we developed for Zcash under the hood. But yeah, it makes the user experience really simple and easy and intuitive, and it's led to this like explosion in usage recently.
Cool. That story though, like the 2020 Zcash ecosystem to today, I mean, back then Zuko was also still at ECC. You were there. Like, what was happening in 2020? What happened sort of in the middle? Because I do feel like there was a lull in a way. I mean, I know that there wasn't internally, but like from where we were sitting, it just felt like, I don't know, there was like less communication, less action for a period of time in the middle between 2020 and now. And there's been a resurgence of sorts. But I don't know if I'm like, this is from the outside. So I'd love to hear what it was like in the inside.
So a couple things happened that were, I guess, significant. So after, the dust settled after Halo and we sort of had posted their paper and our ideas, and that kind of turned into the whole folding scheme, accumulation scheme lineage of cryptography, we went off and we decided, okay, well, it seems practical in our roadmap for the future cryptography of Zcash for us to actually go down the rabbit hole of like recursive proofs and stuff like that, and that we could do so without a trusted setup. And so we set out, and this was my main project, was to set out and build the cryptography for our next shielded pool, which was Orchard, which is the protocol inside Zcash that pretty much everyone's using right now. It was a very long project, and it was a complicated project, but we managed to do it and meet our performance targets barely and ship it. And so from a technical standpoint, it was a success, especially given the complexity. So, and it's doing well now, but for the months that were after the launch of this protocol in Zcash, there was this spam attack in Zcash where some griefer came along and started just spamming it. And we realized some parts of our infrastructure and some parts of our code and our cryptography and kind of tooling was not equipped to handle the kind of load that was being exercised by this spam attack.
Wow.
And so we had to put out fires, and we spent about a year
only
putting fires out and not building anything.
Yeah, because you would have focused. I just like a lot of the focus had been on like the strength of this cryptography that was providing the privacy. It's almost like it's not a side channel attack, but it's like this out of nowhere other kind of like an area apparently that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
Where someone could attack you, but not the privacy part necessarily.
We definitely thought about it, but there was a little bit of a complacency in being able to put off certain kinds of performance optimizations we were aware of that we knew that we could do technically, but that we just didn't have time to implement because we were working on, it's just a matter of priorities. So we ended up not prioritizing the optimizations. And then when this spam attack happened, we were caught off guard. And it sucked because it was just very distracting. It's hard to context switch from putting fires out to building things or to build interesting things and communicate well while you're putting fires out. So you kind of had, it's an all hands on deck kind of thing.
It's adrenaline kind of all the time, I guess.
Yeah. Very distracting. And that took like a year of our entire company, really.
Damn. What year was that? What time frame?
Well, let's see. It was probably 2022 to 2023 timeframe, somewhere around there. I don't know. I'm off by one on my years, clearly. So I'm not really sure exactly, but it's something like that. But it was a long time. And then after that, sort of while we're picking up the pieces, we realized, we had to reprioritize what we needed to do in order to make Zcash successful. And a lot of that was, focusing on actually making the user experience for mobile payments really, really good, which is different from all the cryptography work. I can work on all this fancy cryptography, make it private, and do all this cool stuff, and it's really fun and interesting to me. But to make Zcash successful, you need to actually make the stuff usable.
For sure.
Otherwise, it doesn't matter. And so we focused a lot on that as a company at the ECC, and those efforts are paying dividends now for sure. But that was a huge change in the priorities as well that happened at the same time. So those are the two main things that happened at ECC that kind of changed. It may have, from the outside, it may have seemed like a
quiet time, but it was actually super active
very
internally.
Very tumultuous, actually.
Oh, wow. When something like that happens to a team, and like the team at ECC has always been regarded as just like this epic research team, epic engineering. But yeah, were there other people who kind of like left during that period, or was there like frustration from other factions? Like, what was happening?
There may have been frustration, but actually we didn't really have much turnover. We had everyone was really focused on. That's one of the things I really loved about ECC and still love about ECC is that they have this really awesome culture. Everyone's there to work on the project and to make the project successful, and we actually care about it. We're not just there for like a paycheck or something. So we believe in the mission. So we really did work hard, knowing especially that in a few months after the dust settles, we could have a retrospective meeting and point at all the mistakes we made and feel good about ourselves or bad about ourselves for making those mistakes.
It's got to be hard though, doing firefighting on a live network with users, with the outside community. What was that interaction like during that? Like, was the outside community always aware? Like, obviously I feel a little bit like I wasn't.
Well, our users were aware because they were like really mad because they couldn't send money around, or they couldn't use their wallets and stuff. Some of them anyway, or quite a lot of them were having problems. And we were insulated as engineers from like the really nasty comments. Those hit our managers first, and they were the firewall. And so I'm sure for them it was really stressful. But for us, it was just, we knew what was broken. We needed to fix it. So we just would do it. And it was a question of what to fix first, really. But
who was the attacker? Do you know?
I have my suspicions, but it doesn't really matter. In fact, we had this kind of principle internally in the company where, because of the way our cryptography works, we can't actually tell who's sending transactions around with the shielded transactions. Just as a matter of principle, we didn't call it an attack internally.
Yeah.
We never called it, we tried not to call it a spam or anything like that. In fact, we had a different name for it called sandblasting. We didn't want to necessarily assume that it was an attack because we couldn't actually distinguish.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of narratives and stuff that happen in this, but internally, just for our own alignment, we couldn't distinguish between an attack and someone actually using it faithfully, which is important, actually.
Yeah. I mean, this was also obviously showing like something that needed to be changed either way. Like it would have been now or later, or then or later, it seems.
Right. And there was some cool like side effects of this. So we did these performance improvements of Zcash after the spam attack that we had known about. These weren't like breakthroughs or anything like that. We'd known for years that we could implement them if we needed to. If like usage went up, just all went up at once, and we weren't expecting that. So we implemented it. And this is some of the last things I worked on, but while I was still at ECC, was implementing those things. And they helped improve the performance and kind of inspired me and some others to think about ways to scale Zcash's underlying protocol, the cryptography, that we hadn't thought of before. It was kind of interesting and actually may have led, at least partly or in a significant way, to Tachyon.
Cool.
Actually.
So I'm now curious what the move away from ECC is for you. Because actually, even in your announcement, it was like, I'm leaving ECC after 9 kind of great years, and I'm not leaving Zcash. And you are working on the Tachyon, just to clarify, like it's an upgrade, right? It's sort of like in the same category as Orchard or Sapling. Would you put it in that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But doesn't ECC do the upgrades? This is where I was like...
Well, so historically, yeah. And when I was at ECC, that's pretty much what I did.
Yeah, okay.
I built shielded pools. I wrote smart cryptography and implemented it. And so I was there for the launch. And when we built the first one, all the upgrades, Sapling, Orchard after that, I was a part of those. And yeah, Tachyon is just me building that again. Of course, like I was saying, the actual priorities of making Zcash successful isn't just building new shielded pools every 3 years. I think there's an important reason to build Tachyon for scale, and it's important to continue iterating and improving it. But ultimately, the priority, especially a year and a half ago, and still today, is to make sure that the project is usable. People can use it, it's intuitive, and that was more of a priority for ECC.
Got it.
ECC still does protocol research, but it's just a lot of the focus over the last year and a half, for good reason, has been on more important things than just throwing together new shielded protocols and stuff.
And you did not want to do that so much. Is that why you decided to sort of branch out?
There was a lot of annoying, just in the weeds engineering work that needed to be done. We still have this legacy C++ code base that we're getting rid of. And part of my soul was sucked out every time I was having to write C++ code. So, things like that. I wanted to work on sort of future long-term crypto research development stuff that does help for Zcash. It's practical, but might not be immediately useful. And so being able to work on my own on that outside of ECC was just the way to do it, I think.
What's the is it a company that you founded to do this? Is it you as a freelancer? Like what's the organization?
Well, so right now it's just a team of people, and we are financed by private donors. Myself and other people have put in our money, our Zcash, basically, into this team to finance development, hire engineers and stuff, and infrastructure to build this project, to make Zcash, more valuable, to improve it with Tachyon. So we're just a team. To the extent that there are legal organizations involved, it's just there for liability or legal or tax reasons or whatever. But for the most part, I like to think about it as like this real kind of grassroots team of Zcashers building for Zcash, which is really kind of interesting because all these shielded pools previously that we had deployed in Zcash, like you're saying, is ECC sort of just hands it on down from the clouds or something in the past. Now we're evolving a little bit as a community, and things are being built outside of ECC. There's other organizations building cryptographic tools and protocol upgrade ideas and proposals and stuff outside of ECC. Shielded Labs, Zcash Foundation's primary contribution now has been, which is separate from ECC, has been working on this full node replacement for our legacy C++ code, and they've done a great job on that. And so there's a lot going on that's been distributing away from, just ECC running the show, which has been healthy, I think.
What happened with the foundation? Because I think back in 2020, the foundation also had, I think there had been some tension between maybe ECC and the Zcash Foundation at some point. I think there was a changing of the guard since we spoke. Yeah, I'm just curious what's happened there.
I try to avoid the politics that were there, but I did witness it a little bit. It's just like people butting heads over what should be a priority for the project, and then distrusting each other because they didn't, immediately change their mind and agree with each other in some cases. And there was just an annoying amount of cynicism, I think, that wasn't necessary. There's no need to relitigate it because we don't actually have to deal with that anymore, thankfully. A lot of that sort of negative, pessimistic, cynical stuff is basically gone. Okay. Over the last year or so, we've kind of purged that from our community, and that's resulted in some heads turning, but that's okay.
Well, let's continue that story from your leaving ECC, working on Tachyon. What is Tachyon? Let's go through some of these details of this upgrade. What makes it different? Does it touch wallets? And actually, you keep referring to it as a shielded pool. So maybe we should explain for anyone who isn't familiar with how Zcash works, what those upgrades mean, how it's kind of like a restart on the privacy part.
Yeah, so when we launched Zcash, we launched it with a shielded pool, which is basically this black hole where you can make payments that are completely private, like information theoretically private for the most part. And the cryptography in our initial launch, it was really bleeding edge, but it was very slow and stuff. And so we had to upgrade it. And so when you do upgrades of these shielded pools, what we do is we introduce all the cryptography and everything else into its own shielded pool.
Yeah.
Separate.
So it's a new
in the
one.
Zcash protocol.
And you migrate everybody, I guess.
People do whatever they want, but you can move your money from one pool to the other. And when you do so, you reveal how much money you're moving in and out of the pools. And once they're in the pool, it's like a black hole, basically.
Yeah.
And these black holes can like shrink and like evaporate or whatever. I don't know what analogy you want to use, but they can, as people migrate around, you can kind of see how big they are, how much money they have in them and stuff. And so we deployed a new upgrade, which was sapling, and that was much more user friendly. It had more features. You could make proofs on mobile phones. Is the main thing about it. So we could actually start building mobile wallets with it for the first time. And that was an upgrade that went live actually in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we built Orchard, which is the one that uses like no trusted setup and all that kind of stuff.
Is it Halo or Halo 2?
Well, it uses Halo 2.
Okay.
The main thing with the Orchard protocol was that it would remove the trusted setup. But then also it would set the stage for the cryptography we wanted to use for scale in the future, even though we hadn't really figured it out yet. And that cryptography is in Orchard, and it's in fact the same cryptography that we're going to be using to build Tachyon.
Nice.
So we ship that in Orchard. Most people use Orchard today. You don't really even need to know this. When you use Zashi, you don't see Orchard much or anything, maybe at all. So you don't know this is happening behind the scenes. Tachyon is just another one of those things that I'm hoping, for the most part, your wallet will hide the details. You might not even see the word Tachyon at all. But behind the scenes, it's using this new cryptography that the goal of which is to make it scale more and to address these like cryptographic bottlenecks and performance issues in the protocol that would limit it from being able to have huge transaction volumes.
You talk a little bit about people moving their funds from one pool to another, but like, are there still people in the sapling pool only?
There's a lot of money still in the sapling pool.
Okay.
There's still some money in the Sprout pool, the original pool, which is the one that had that inflation bug in it.
Wow.
That we don't think anyone's exploited. We're pretty damn sure that nobody's exploited.
And if they did exploit it now, you still wouldn't know.
You would. If they did exploit it, then they would either, I mean, we have these turnstiles. You could see the money that was taken out of it.
Oh.
See how much money is taken out of it. And if it's more than went in, then it sounds an alarm and the whole blockchain like fails or something. I forget exactly.
And that hasn't happened?
No.
Okay.
And we can still see that there's maybe like, I'm guessing like $30 million or something like that sitting in that pool.
Interesting.
Probably lost coins, or maybe somebody just hasn't bothered to upgrade or whatever. That's just sitting in that pool. And the longer it sits in that pool, I mean, it's just a surprise waiting for anyone that, first off, if you actually keep some coins in that pool and you want to go back and grab them, and somebody had previously gone and like counterfeited using this bug from like 8 years ago, when you as an honest user try to take your money that you're owed out, you will sound the alarm.
Okay.
So if you sit down and think about the game theory and everything else, there's no one really suggests that this pool is ever compromised.
Okay.
And we don't think it ever was. But yeah, so there's a lot of money sitting in the older pools, and that'll probably be the case for a long time with the old pools and with Orchard too. There's going to be a lot of, even when we ship Tachyon, there will be people using Orchard for years to come before maybe the quantum computer apocalypse breaks it or something.
Which I want to talk to you about, because we've done a lot of episodes in the last year all about the quantum threat or non-threat, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, so the folks who are in Orchard, folks who could go into Tachyon, I've used Zcash wallets for many, many years, probably since 2019, 2018. But I don't ever remember like upgrading myself or migrating myself. So was that somehow like, was the wallets doing it for you? And what would happen now with this upgrade or with the new pool?
With the new pool, it depends exactly on how the cryptography works, but ideally the wallet handles this for you.
Okay.
So you don't know pretty much. So we added these new address formats to our wallets called unified addresses. So if I send you an address and you have an old wallet that has funds in sapling, then you can send me money in sapling, because the address has both a sapling and a Orchard receiver inside of it. So that allows it to kind of work, but then your wallet tries to keep your funds moving into the correct direction.
The new one. Okay.
So yeah, it migrates things over and prefers payments with like the modern pool. There's a bunch of heuristics that are used to sort of guess what the most healthy migration strategy is that the wallets sort of do for you, but that's more or less what happens.
Do you expect the same for Tachyon? Like, should it just kind of automatically be happening behind the scenes?
It should be like that, ideally. Now, the thing is, Tachyon does raise the possibility of there being changes to the way that the payment protocol works, which might require at least some sort of like visibility, not visibility into the fact that there's a new shielded pool, but it will be obvious that something's happening.
Okay.
Possibly behind the scenes.
Interesting.
That's different than it's one thing about Tachyon that's different than all these other pools, or one thing that's potentially different is that the core cryptography that we use in Tachyon doesn't assume a particular payment protocol. It's being decoupled from it. And what that means in practice is that unlike with Sprout and Sapling and Orchard, where the payment protocol and the cryptography that are on-chain are very integrated with each other, they use the same key structures and all this sort of stuff. We're separating them so that you can build different kinds of payment protocols. The goal being, because it's not coupled, we can discard certain parts of the protocol that are not scalable. For example, in all of our previous shielded pools, they have these gigantic ciphertexts, and you have to scan them all in order to check to see if you've received money from everyone else's transactions, which doesn't scale.
Takes a long time.
That's an assumption about how the wallet's UX works and stuff. Personally, I don't want Tachyon to actually integrate a particular wallet UX payment protocol into the core cryptography that sits on chain. I want that to be as simple as possible and let us experiment and build the right UX on top of it.
I want to hear a bit of so this is a little bit about like the payment structure and like how that would work. But what is the cryptography in Tachyon? How is it different? And you put a little pin in this Halo 2 being powering Orchard, but I think you wanted to say something more about that because I know there's also various versions of Halo 2 out there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So what happened was back in 2019, we posted this paper. Dara, Emma, Jack Grigg, and I posted this paper about Halo. And Halo was sort of this new technique for doing recursive proofs, which turned into this, the accumulation and folding scheme sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an actual like implementation, and there wasn't an actual.
What was it? Was it just the ideas?
It was just the technique,
were clear?
And it was also a protocol that sort of reasonably used it and could show that it was practical. And we did intend to build it, and we actually did build a prototype for the paper just to see if it would work. It was just kind of an academic thing. But we weren't going to use it in Zcash. We were going to use whatever, ended up being better or more efficient because we have our own constraints. And so as time went on, we realized, okay, we need to design these elliptic curves to do this. And maybe the ones that we wrote in the Halo paper weren't the best ones, so that we could do better ones, which ended up being the pasta curves, which are used by, for example, Mina, used by Zcash today in Orchard. These are conducive to the technique that was in the original Halo construction, in the original Halo paper. We then went on to implement for Orchard specifically a new proving system that used those elliptic curves and other cryptography related to it in order to build the new shielded pool to exercise that cryptography and like get us moving in that direction so that we could use something like Halo for recursive proofs. Because we knew recursive proofs, we were going to need them for scale. We weren't exactly sure what the architecture would look like, but we knew we were going to need them. So with Orchard, it was a chance for us to sort of move in that direction, get rid of the trusted setup. So we built this Halo 2 thing, which is more or less just like a glorified, highly optimized Plonk implementation that we tried really, really hard to make it fit within the confines of the constraints on verification time and proof size that we needed in order to make it practical to ship it in Zcash, which is very difficult. You can assume we wanted to get rid of their trusted setup. So doing that, and while also supporting these elliptic curves for the recursion, was kind of tricky to do without a ton of hand done optimization work. So that's what Halo 2 was. But Halo 2 actually, ironically, doesn't actually contain the recursive proof, or at least the implementation we shipped in Orchard doesn't contain the recursive proof details that made Halo actually interesting in the first place. It set the stage for it, but that's what it was intending to do. But
But Halo 2, there were workshops being given. There's other teams that sort of ran with Halo 2. Do any of the other implementations have those original thoughts in them, or did they all sort of drop it in the way that you did?
Oh, no. I can't speak to what all of them really were trying to do with Halo 2. I think a lot of them were just trying to use a highly optimized Plonk implementation, and we had managed to just build one that we were able to, ship. And so they felt comfortable, building protocols and testing things on top of it. Now, within their constraints, they needed trusted setups. And so they actually went through our Halo 2, they forked it and started adding things like KZG polynomial commitments to replace the ones we had and changing all the cryptography and stuff.
Yeah.
So their goals are totally different than ours.
Okay.
I don't know if they supported, recursion in them. I can't remember. But there were a lot of teams that were kind of playing with that stuff. This was years ago, and we didn't build Halo 2 trying to make it so people would use Halo 2 specifically outside of Zcash. We built it for Orchard.
For yourselves, yeah.
Yeah.
One last question on the Halo 2 and Orchard kind of topic. You mentioned there's no trusted setup. Did that mean that the upgrade did not need a trusted setup? Or has that meant that some of those adjustments or fixes that you did after, did it make it easier for you to do those? I'm trying to understand what the lack of trusted setup actually enables in that sort of universality, that thing you had pioneered originally. Yeah, when you had to fix things, did the fact that you didn't need a trusted setup mean you were actually redeploying stuff? Or were you just tweaking things? I don't actually know when you talked about those fires, what you were doing.
There was this sort of continuum where we had these very rigid trusted setups in the first, or stiff kind of trusted setups in the first incarnations of snarks that were deployed in Zcash and other places where
you deploy and you couldn't touch them.
Right. It was baked into the protocols. The trusted setup was for those particular things. And so what I worked on for Sapling was this way to make it so that it was a little bit easier for us to update it so that the trusted setups were cheaper to do, more or less, so that you could do half the trusted setup without regard to the actual application you're using it for, and then you do the other half for it. And actually, people still use that same exact protocol today to build Grot16 snarks. They use the same trusted setup technique where they have this half of it's universal and the other half's not. And you needed that other half. And so I started working on Sonic, and which is what I think the first time I was on the podcast, I talked about that a little bit, I think.
I did a study club on it too, and you spoke at Summit. I mean, I feel like Sonic has come up. It's sort of this legacy, never really implemented, I guess, right? Never really used, but it had the idea that changed everything.
Right, yeah. So we proposed this sort of probably the first practical example of a snark that didn't require a per circuit trusted setup.
Yeah.
There's this universal thing. In fact, that had existed before, but there are papers that existed prior to that weren't practical. They had quadratic size reference strings and stuff. But this was the first one with a linear size reference string. So we did that with Sonic, and that makes it really easy to update the circuit, right? Because now you need to just change the circuit code, and you can reuse the same setup you did originally. So that was the goal. That was the goal of the whole construction for practical reasons was, well, if we just have to do the setup once, then that works. Of course, very quickly after that, snarks that don't require a trusted setup became very, very practical. The Halo-style recursion stuff showed that could even be applied to the recursive proofs. Starks and bulletproofs and all the rest of this stuff kind of took off, and it became practical to actually build snarks without a trusted setup. So the whole trusted setup thing started kind of dying. The motivation for it started dying around the time that we finally got our hands on the universal snarks setups, which is okay. So yeah, that's sort of the continuum. So getting rid of the trusted setup, I guess at the end of this is just getting rid of the question mark, right? Because if you try to explain to somebody how Zcash works and you want to get them to trust it, you could, if there's a trusted setup involved, then Zuko taught me to explain it this way. If you don't have a trusted setup, you can give somebody a math textbook and explain, or more or less, you can give them a math textbook and explain to them how Zcash works. They can read it and they can learn it if they're, whatever, they were super smart, and they could go, okay, fine. I think that this is trustworthy. But with a trusted setup, you need a math textbook and you need a history textbook.
Oh.
Right? Because you need to know, who are these people that contributed? Why should I believe they contributed?
Yeah.
Think of 1,000 years from now, would you trust the trusted setup 1,000 years prior? Maybe based on just pure momentum and historical legacy, it'd be worth trying. But then, I don't know. There's a lot of question marks, and there are a lot of people who refuse to use Zcash because it had a trusted setup.
Wow. Though back then.
Yeah.
Actually, if the first trusted setup had been corrupted. Would that matter now? Because I feel like every time you did the upgrades, it sort of wiped the slate clean, right?
That's true. That's exactly the point of the whole turnstile mechanism, where you actually account for how much money moves between the pools, because there's a cap to the damage that can be done if there were a compromise. Like the original pool still exists in Zcash today. You could, if there were a bug in it, you could take the money out of it. You could exploit it, but you could only exploit it up to a certain point, and not very much money is sitting in it now at all. There's almost nothing you can do with it. So every time we introduce a new pool, we've gotten the habit of, for better or worse, introducing a turnstile to ensure that there is this accounting, so that there's always this way to see over time that there isn't like an inflation bug being exploited as we're improving the technology.
To just kind of, I think the end of my last question was about Orchard and Halo 2. And when you were fighting the fires, did you actually have to upgrade somehow? You were using the same pool. You weren't redeploying it, from what I gathered. But did you kind of need to take advantage of that lack of a trusted setup to do that? Or was it sort of a separate engineering
No,
feat?
the problems that we ran into for that sort of episode, for that year-long firefighting episode, was mostly practical engineering things. Like your wallet needs to go off and prove that you have money when you go to spend it. And the way that it does that is it sort of reads all the other transactions on chain and synchronizes the local, what's called a witness, into where your location of where your money is, basically, in order to later prove eventually that you can spend it. And you need to keep that witness up to date in order to ensure that you're as maximally private as possible, or so they say. And so the problem is the wallet would literally just scan all the transactions to do that, or synchronize transaction by transaction, which is expensive, especially when the chain's getting spammed. We knew like 10 years ago that there was a way to do it where you could just sort of skip list your way through the process by using these things that we now call like Merkle bridges, or these subtree sort of techniques with the Merkle tree or whatever. It doesn't matter. Point is, we knew that we could make it really efficient and not do this like linear time scanning process, but we just hadn't implemented it. And so that's just one example of where, no, we didn't need to change the circuit. We didn't need to like mess with the trusted setup or anything. Thank God. But we did need to go and do a bunch of practical, like, we need to start caching signatures that we weren't caching before. We need to start doing, just things that we hadn't considered a priority, low-hanging fruit stuff. And it, fortunately for us, because it was stuff that we could actually, fix. But yeah.
More on Tachyon. When is it coming?
So my goal with Tachyon is to get it out this year.
Oh, wow. 2026. Okay.
Yeah, late this year, I'd like to get out the shielded pool for it into mainnet. And that doesn't necessarily mean like the wallets will have support for it or whatever. There's a lot that goes into that, and this is a long process. When we previously did Orchard, Sapling, and so on, and Sprout, we didn't really have wallet support when we did we shipped the pool with some certainty that we could build the wallets that would work right. And in parallel with shipping the pool, we would build the wallet stuff.
Okay.
I want to do the same thing in a sense, not entirely, putting the wallet stuff off afterward, doing quite a bit of it in parallel. And there's some interesting things happening right now behind the scenes on that. But the priority is getting the pool out. It's something that we can actually do in a year.
Interesting.
Because we've done it in small amounts of time and for previous pools. And
but isn't it's a different beast now, right? Because users, like, this is something I wanted to understand. We know that, like, in terms of like ZEC price action, it was very high back in 2017. It dropped down. It was very low. And then recently it's gone up in price. But users, like the users of the shielded pool, like, has that just been a straight line up? Like, was it quite not used back then? And then, like, did it also have a dip, or is it, yeah?
Yeah, I think the price action of Zcash back in those days, in like the 2017 era, was totally unrelated to the actual shielded transaction usage.
Okay.
But today, it's very related.
Yeah.
I think. If you look at a chart of how much money is sitting in the shielded pools now, it's like, just up and up and up. It's
Amazing.
up only. It's pretty incredible. There's like 8 billion. I don't know. I don't know how many. Maybe it's closer to like 4.5 or 5 billion or something like that. Dollars worth of money of ZEC sitting in the shielded pools.
And this is kind of proof to the project, right? Because it used to be, I remember early on, so much of the Zcash or the ZEC was being traded in centralized exchanges, which are not, it was not the zero knowledge part of it. It was just a public visible token that was being traded.
Right.
Sort of like I sort of said speculation before, where it was like a little bit of like just the brand, and people wanted to own the token, but they weren't actually using Zcash for the utility that it's built for, which is the fact that it offers privacy. And I do remember the shielded pool, at least, I mean, I don't know exactly what the figures were. I don't know if you do, but I mean, maybe, I'm assuming you do. But like back then, it was a small percentage of the owners of ZEC actually using the shielded pool. Has that shifted? Has that flipped?
Yeah. So like back then, I think it was like 2% or something ridiculous of that was using shielded. But now it's like 30% or something like that. More
crazy.
Than that. And a lot of the reason that was so low before was, well, obviously in the original launch of Zcash, like you needed a desktop computer and you needed like 40 seconds of compute time to make a proof, to send a payment or
and
something.
Some pretty strong technical skills too, right?
Yeah, you needed to use like a RPC, CLI kind of thing to interact with it. And it was just messed up. We improved the performance of that with Sapling. We started building apps so that you could use it. What really exploded after we shipped Orchard and then we started working on things like Zashi was that because of this renewed focus on just like making the cryptography, like the cryptography is already great. Let's focus on the user.
Mm-hmm.
And with Zashi, we did that, and it's fantastic. And a couple of the main things that really caused this explosion, one of them was like a hardware wallet support that was like built into the app.
Okay, so like Ledger, you could now use. Before that, you were not able. Like you either had this hot wallet or a hardware wallet.
Right? Yeah. Like to use shielded transactions, you had to have a hot wallet, basically.
Yeah. That is scary.
You don't need to do that anymore. And the other thing, one of the other things is that the way the addresses worked were kind of confusing, and that's sort of been resolved a little bit with Zashi, with this unified address thing I was mentioning before, where you don't know what pools you're interacting with. You just know you get an address, you send payments to it, just Bitcoin or anything else. And so
before that, could you have like screwed yourself by like accidentally sending from like a Sapling pool to an Orchard pool without knowing?
I don't think you would have screwed yourself in terms of like losing money or anything necessarily, but you definitely would have run into problems such as, your recipient can only receive money on a certain kind of address and your wallet doesn't support it.
Oh.
Or vice versa, like I can only send money to certain addresses or whatever. So those kind of problems are resolved a little bit when you have multiple payment capabilities in a single address, so that there's like a transition period where people who haven't moved their funds away from the senders who haven't moved their funds away from Sapling yet, or recipients who haven't upgraded to their wallet to something that uses Orchard yet, could still interact with the rest of the users. And that was like an important part of the network upgrade to enable that.
Cool. So you're saying end of the year, we think it will probably be kind of seamless, hopefully within the wallet, or not too much action on the part of the user. But are you worried? Because now, like the point of that question before was like, now there's a lot of people using these wallets that you're going to depend on. Like, could you end up with an accidental split if, say, the Zashi, I mean, I know that you're very close to the team and I think it's going to be fine, but if they didn't implement it, what happens?
Yeah, no, those a really good question, because that's something that I do think about. There are people who really like the current Zcash UX, where you send payments to addresses. If you have a seed phrase, you load it into your wallet and you get your transaction history back. All these things are great and intuitive, and the Zashi experience is fantastic. The problem is that the way that we got that experience is by cheating a lot, not in terms of cheating on the privacy, but really like the underlying tech isn't scalable.
Mm-hmm.
So there are practical realities that we're going to run into trying to extend that UX to a scalable system. And so you have to make a compromise somewhere. Well, basically you're forced to make it scale. You have to put some infrastructure between your wallet and the chain. And that infrastructure doesn't have to have any kind of compromise or visibility into your wallet privacy. It doesn't have to have custody over your funds, but there needs to be some cryptographic, whatever, some infrastructure in between you and the chain. And depending on how that works, and depending on how the payment protocol works, some things might be different. For example, and this isn't necessarily what I'm advocating for, but you could have a payment protocol where users actually don't have the ability to bootstrap off the chain and with their seed phrase and recover their transaction history like they can in Zcash today or in pretty much every other blockchain. they can do that in other blockchains because it's not public. So
Or it is public,
you can just
rather.
ask, or sorry, because it's public, right?
Yeah.
You can ask like an indexing server, well, here's my addresses. Tell me how much money I have and how to spend it. You can't do that in Zcash, but in Zcash today, you can scan the whole blockchain to see where your money is, which is a very time-consuming process.
And this is the lack of scalability you're talking about.
That's the problem. And so we have to relent somewhere. And so I'm keeping myself very open in terms of how to do that, but it may involve changes to the payment protocol, to the way that you actually use the app to make payments. And it may involve changes to the way that you interact with the chain, where you actually don't directly download the blockchain, you download something else from someone else and use that thing to make payments and stuff. You don't give away your privacy and you don't give away custody of your coins, but building that separate infrastructure opens up a can of worms, like who runs it, how are they incentivized to build, work on it? What if it's the people building it don't exist anymore? How do I get my funds? And so there's all sorts of like political questions and UX questions that are definitely on my mind, and I'm concerned about them. And I'm in parallel with the development of Tachyon. There's some really awesome work that's being done to solve those, which I'm excited for over the next few months to hear from some people who are working on that. But yeah, that definitely is a good question.
I've seen sort of talk of ZEC ending up in other ecosystems, bridging out. I don't actually understand, like, what kind of bridges are there from the Zcash ecosystem? Are these like the classic kind of Bitcoin bridges where it's like a lock on one side and there's like a multi-sig in the middle? How sophisticated are these?
I don't think there used to be some people working on. Well, I don't know. There's some people working on some bridges.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how. Like there was this one that was used NPCs, I think. I don't know if they ever took off or got used by anything. I think the infrastructure for cross-chain payments that people have been using in Zcash has been near intense.
Yeah.
Which is just swaps.
Okay.
And so just simple swaps.
How does that work, though? Like, I don't understand how those two systems are integrating with each other, because I'm just thinking like a proof of work Zcash with a privacy, like a shielded pool, and then near, is it the concept of near being implemented in Zcash? And how do you lock into it? Yeah, I just haven't really understood that. And maybe you're the wrong person to ask. I don't know.
Well, yeah, they have some interesting tech. You can contribute liquidity to their liquidity pools inside of different cryptocurrencies in the Near ecosystem.
In Near,
and do swaps between them, and you get paid to do them, and to do those lockups and to facilitate to act as a market maker.
But how do you do it? Like, are you sending your ZEC to a place on one side and then you receive something on the other? Like, I just don't understand.
I have no idea.
Okay. I have to ask maybe the Near team to understand this.
Near have their own, yeah, I don't know exactly like how it works, but basically it's a DEX,
yeah,
or ostensibly. So it's some, I mean, if I want to send a cross-chain payment with Zashi, I'm telling this black box, I don't really even personally give a shit how the black box works, but the black box promises it's going to send some money off to the next person. And in the last like 50 times I've used it to do that, it's worked. From my perspective, that's good enough.
And you're saying that there's like market makers on either side sort of holding tokens, and they are providing the liquidity and this sort of...
They do the swap just in time and send the payment out. And it's kind of cool how the protocol works, where Zashi can actually say, I want this address to receive the money after the swap's complete. And they can tell that to their DEX infrastructure, protocol, whatever, and make that happen. It either happens or it doesn't. If it doesn't happen, you get your money back, presumably.
It's funny. I feel like my question, even about bridging, is a little bit like 2021 or something, when we were still trying to do these like hard bridges and not just get market makers on either side, like kind of manage it.
Yeah, the trustless bridges or semi-trustless bridges.
Yeah, we were trying to use cryptography. But it sounds like in this case, it's probably not using that.
No, it's as much. Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff with that, but I think it's mostly just you trust the service to do the swap, and that's okay. You keep your wallet history and your custody of your funds, and if something goes wrong, either the system breaks and you don't get a refund, or you do.
Yeah. What about tokens coming into the Zcash community? Into the Zcash blockchain. I remember, I think it was Zcon 3, maybe it was a bit after that, but there was some talk of like bringing something in or having stable coins in the Zcash world itself. Is that still like on the radar?
Yeah, so there was this effort for a long time And some engineers and researchers at ECC, I say some engineers and researchers, I'm basically talking about Strad and Dara. But
the ones we know, yeah.
Yeah, they were working on these things called ZSAs, which is Zcash shielded assets, and the idea would be to add a token type, to the existing shielded pool, and you could send money around and add a little bare bones issuance protocol. And ECC actually wasn't leading the effort on this. So Strad and Dara were working on like how do you actually integrate this into the orchard construction securely, and there's a lot that goes into that, but. In parallel, there are these other teams, and principally Kedit, who are working on actual implementation and trying to get this into the protocol because they saw an opportunity for, like you're saying, like stablecoin, whatever issuance. I've never been bullish on ZSAs and Zcash, and I've never participated in the design of it. I haven't spent any brain cells on it.
Okay.
Because I think that if we tried to add them, likely we would go through all the effort of building it and implementing it, which is a huge opportunity cost, and we would end up shipping something that needed a feature that we didn't anticipate.
Oh.
And we aren't just the right team we just aren't the right team to build it, that kind of stuff. So I really like the dumb money philosophy with Zcash, where we just keep it,
Simple.
Make it payments, private payments, and little surface area of attacks, rigorous like cryptography, political stability in the protocol and things like that. That's a good use case for Zcash, and a lot of people agree with that. A lot of people, like the ZSA concept is very controversial. There's a lot of people who are excited about it. A lot of people hate it.
Is it ZSA's Zcash stable asset?
Shielded assets. So they don't necessarily have to be stable coins. They can be, you can make your own like...
Oh, this is just the other assets. Okay, any other.
Yeah.
What about things like, another thing that I haven't seen in the Zcash context, there's no validators, but voting and like how to make changes on the protocol. This has come up in a lot of the DeFi spaces. Yeah. Was there ever conversation about that?
Yeah. So there's been this sort of renaissance in, I guess you could say, in Zcash governance and in the community, where over the last couple of years, especially, the coin holders have gotten more involved in signaling their desires and intentions to the community and to the Zcash developers as to what they think should happen. For example, the biggest example being, where should the dev funds go, or where should the issuance go, or part of the issuance go? And so now the coin holders have total control over a huge portion of that, which is like retroactive grants for paying people for work that they've done in the past for Zcash. And giving them access to those, like the purse strings, has sort of changed the dynamic a little bit, where there's more accountability.
Interesting.
And in order to make this coin holder stuff work, we've had to have a voting protocol of some kind. And so there's this one that's sort of in its infancy still. It has lots of downsides, but it works. And it's a way to use your shielded funds to privately vote.
Cool.
And so over the last year and a half or so, we've had several of these votes where coin holders have been able to vote. Like millions of ZAC worth of coins have been voting in these votes over things like who should we give grants to, policy changes. And soon, actually, maybe later this month or whatever, there's going to be a new poll starting, which is asking coin holders what they think, and also other polling opportunities besides just coin holders, but coin holders especially, asking them what they think about certain protocol upgrades that we intend to do and getting their feedback. And one of the questions that will probably be on that poll will be, do you like ZSAs? And I suspect that
some will. Or you think most won't?
I think most won't.
Okay.
But that's my guess. I don't know. It depends. And this sort of stuff can change over time. This is just one signaling mechanism that we can use to learn what the community wants.
That's cool.
But it's a really useful one, and it's changed a lot. The way that we've been engineering and building Zcash has changed a little bit. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but we're
getting more feedback, or like more serious feedback almost, right? Like now it's not just voices in a community chat board or on Twitter. You're getting a little bit more like people with skin in the game.
That's right.
Weighing in.
Yeah, I think that's affected things, and it's also made us more accountable to what we work on and stuff. So
ZK, the term, the concept, the ecosystem changed a lot since we first met and since you've been on. I know you've spoken a little bit about the ZK for privacy, which is what it the zero knowledge part of ZK snarks is the private part versus snarks, which is the succinct part and the kind of the scaling opportunity. There, in our community, there was a period where a lot of products were calling themselves ZK, but weren't actually using the zero knowledge. I feel like in the last year, especially in the last 6 months, we've seen a resurgence of the privacy part of ZK. Zcash has never deferred from that. Like, you've always been on that track. So what do you make of it? Like, I'm assuming you're happy to see ZK return to being ZK.
Yeah, definitely. ZK, I mean, marketing always wins in the end, so you're kind of yelling at clouds a little bit if you're complaining. I don't mind yelling at clouds sometimes, but yeah, yes, a lot of people say ZK when they really mean that they're just talking about snarks or whatever.
Yeah.
That's okay. But yeah, up until very recently, nobody really cared about privacy when it came to snarks.
Or they were kind of afraid of privacy too. I mean, Tornado really freaked everyone out because then it was sort of such a blank. I mean, it's such an interesting action by the government to do it because it did cause just an absolute chilling of almost all the privacy products. There's a few that didn't chill, like you guys continued on your path, and Aztec for sure continued as privacy focused, but it was hard. And there was almost like the popularity of privacy went down too. Like the interest, not only from the teams, but also from the audience, I found there was people were just kind of wary of it for a period of time. Everyone switched over to scaling. You could still use this tech in a cool way, but not touch the weird stuff, the dangerous stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing that changed a lot. There was this pivot. Well, I wouldn't say it was a pivot, but there was this huge renewed focus on regulatory outreach at Electric Coin Company. And that has also paid dividends. So there's a lot of people that are embracing privacy today, thanks to people like Paul Brigner and everyone else at ECC who worked very hard on this sort of stuff and facilitating relationships, getting rid of these stigmas surrounding privacy and privacy tech and snarks and zero knowledge and all that in places like DC and stuff. That's really, really helped. That takes a long time to do. And effort is still ongoing to continue to do that. But yeah, now we're in a political environment and a regulatory environment where we can start openly going, we use zero knowledge in our protocol. What are you going to do about it? Which might not last forever. So we need to really dig in, I think.
We talked about the cryptography that sort of powered Orchard, but what is just kind of bringing it back to Tachyon, what is the cryptography that actually powers Tachyon? Like, I'm assuming you've taken steps past Halo 2. Are you using recursion or folding, kind of the more, I don't want to say advanced, but the more recent developments around how to scale ZK snarks and circuits and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. So building on top of the cryptography we shipped in Orchard, which is sort of recursion friendly, I guess you could call it, folding friendly, whatever. We want to use recursive proofs to scale the parts of the cryptography in Zcash that they actually help to scale. And the roots of this go back a long time ago, back in 2018 or 2019. Dara Emma did his talk in Amsterdam, I think, about here's the Zerocash protocol. And it was one of Dara's famous talks where it's every slide has 1,000 bullet points on it, which is awesome.
Is that a thing? I didn't know that. Okay.
No, Dara has these awesome, dense technical talks that everybody loves. And it's a legendary talk, I think, because I go back to it all the time. The presentation goes into extraordinary detail, every part of the cryptography that we use in Zcash and which things have asymptotic, performance bottlenecks or whatever. And back then, we had realized that pretty much everything in Zcash was scaled pretty well within, just improve the constants with better tech, except a couple things. And one of the major things was this continual growth of this thing called the nullifier set, which is how our construction and a bunch of other constructions work for privacy, where you prove that you haven't spent your money before. In order to do that anonymously, you have to reveal this revocation token. And all the nodes on the network have to remember every revocation token revealed previously and use that as you can't reveal the same one twice.
Yeah.
And that's, that is a difficult thing to scale, because if you have, let's say 100 transactions per second, which isn't even that much, but let's say you just had that. We're talking about gigabytes in growth of this database a day, possibly. just on
Whoa.
on that order of magnitude. So just for a small amount of transaction volume. So that's not just growth in the blockchain history though, because that's one thing. We can always, discard old history that's irrelevant to us. This is increase in state growth. So validators will have to maintain a big key value store that's growing linearly over time by a lot of keys every day, potentially at high transaction volumes. And they'll have to query this arbitrarily and update it arbitrarily as new transactions come through. So we knew that this was a problem a long time ago, and we knew recursion could solve it. And this was even before Halo, I think, that we were talking about this stuff. Halo made the recursion practical, and we knew we'd do something to fix it, but we weren't sure how it would work. Maybe it would use sharding and a bunch of other things, and you'd have like succinct blockchains solving certain things and whatever. But earlier last year, we had, with the Tachyon, there was this summit or something, or ZCon 6, I think it was called, where I did a talk where I talked about, this particular bottleneck in Zcash and how it's basically the last outstanding bottleneck in our cryptography, and how we might be able to solve it using recursive proofs. And it turns out there's this trick that you can use where instead of revealing one revocation token when you spend your money, you reveal potentially a different one depending on when you spend it, which is a new concept for nullifiers. And it turned into this paper that Ian Myers and I actually posted a couple months ago.
What's it called? I think it was in ZK Mesh. I feel like I saw it, but
Yeah, it's called A Note on Notes.
Okay. Yeah.
Look that up. But basically, we're just sort of saying, okay, well, there's this thing you can do where you can say, okay, I'm spending my money. Here's my nullifier for the current epoch. And your nullifiers will be different for previous epochs. But of course, because they're unlinkable with each other in between epochs, you can hand this off to a remote server that actually does the recursive proofing for you. And that server doesn't learn your nullifier that you end up revealing publicly. You re-randomize the proof it sends back to you and fold it into your own proof locally. And so there's no privacy issue. And you have this remote server essentially do the job for the validator prior to you making your transaction of proving that you haven't spent it. And the validator in turn does not need to actually have this nullifier set that grows to infinity. It can be capped to a very recent set of nullifiers. And so that's where the recursive proofs kind of come in with the Tachyon's architecture. It's like the core of it is using it to prove this, to make the validators have no strong long-term state growth, kind of punt that off to a different part of the stack, this
almost
new
like
entity.
Off-chain workers?
Yeah.
Ish?
It is. It definitely, it's a form of that.
Okay.
So the validators are doing just less logic. They're kind of outsourcing this part of the logic, which had previously just been all done by the validators, even though the validators were checking snarks. That's the thing.
You have to tell me, actually, you keep talking about validators, and all of a sudden I'm like, but aren't you guys proof of work? Did I miss a huge step?
Oh, sorry. So when I use the word validator, I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of, maybe I shouldn't be using that word. I should be using a different word called finalizer, possibly. But
okay.
There's been
it's like a role that does something specific in Zcash. Okay, it's not the validators in the way that we've understood them with Cosmos style validators or something like that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it basically when I was saying validator, what I meant is some entity, whether it's a miner or just a full node sitting on the network, or maybe a light client that's a trustless light client or something like that needs to be able to check the current state of the blockchain is valid.
Okay.
Which miners, of course, need to do in order to continue to make progress on consensus, for one thing. And in fact, they're the most important part of their role as miners is to do that properly. So they need to validate the chain. So they need the whole history. They need to check the snarks, and they need to do this other thing, which is check that the nullifiers were valid.
But would you call it a verifier? Or that's too loaded a term because it has the zero knowledge, prover verifier.
I mean,
context.
Whatever word helps you understand it. Verifier definitely has the zero, the snark connotations attached to it.
Solver or whatever, the checker, I forget the word you just used
checker,
there.
I mean, we have this finalizer concept, which would be the concept is a kind of validator, which is responsible for choosing the next blocks or signaling to other people which the current chain history is valid, however they do that. This is a very general term.
Okay, but Zcash is still proof of work. It is not proof of stake.
Currently, it is proof of work. That's right.
Will there be a proof of stake part of Zcash?
Yeah, that's something that people are possibly working on.
That's not Tachyon, though. That's not in the new. Okay.
Tachyon's totally agnostic to the consensus layer changes.
I see.
For the most part.
Just the pool.
Right.
What are the agents, just to double check this, though, the agents that help move tokens between the unshielded and shielded, is that just the miners doing that? Is it like there is no entity, right, helping you do that?
When you make transactions on the network?
If you shield your tokens from an unshielded, so you have unshielded, you're trying to move it into the shielded pool, are you just sending it, this is kind of like Zcash 101, I totally realize, and you've probably explained it to me on previous episodes.
No,
but
go for it.
Yeah, is there any sort of actor, or like, is it the miner? Is there somebody who's actually facilitating that, or is it the user themselves who's doing that?
Well, the user does most of the work.
Okay.
For good reason, because we want it to be private. So if you have to involve somebody else, it should be for something that has nothing to do with your custody or privacy. And the role that the miners have in that process is just finalizing transactions. It's deciding what things are finalized or what things should go into blocks, mining the transactions and ordering them. Yeah. So that's the current role that exists. What is changing in Tachyon is we're adding kind of a new role where it's somebody who, or some entity that helps your wallet, among other things, synchronize your wallet as the chain, as other people are doing transactions on the network. So that your wallet doesn't have to download the whole chain in order to synchronize things. It can just ask the server to do it for it. And the server doesn't have to get any of your private information or be privileged in any way, learn about your wallets, learn when you do transactions or anything like that. So it's totally private. But they do have to run these recursive proofs and stuff in order to make that work. That's the new role that's sort of being added.
Interesting. Is this sort of instead of light clients? Like, is this an alternative to the kind of classic light client option? And Zcash has had light clients, right? I think you guys had them.
It's related to light clients, I'd say. Like, we have these servers that help our wallets learn about the current state of the blockchain under some assumptions. And right now, the wallets sort of kind of take as gospel a little bit, like what the current state of the network is. In theory, you could have a better light client that has better trust assumptions or no trust assumptions using clever cryptography and things like succinct blockchains and stuff. We're not going to do that with Tachyon, but you can have some limited visibility into the current state of the blockchain using light client technology like Fly Client, which is actually integrated into Zcash, where you can sort of, under some assumptions, you can get a pretty reasonable view into what the likely current state of the blockchain is, which is important for light clients. But for shielded wallets, we have a different problem. On top of just knowing when we receive money, unlike most blockchains, we can't just like make a transaction and just post it. We need some help to do that. We need like the whole transaction history to do it. And so that's the thing we're trying to pun off, that last piece. And that's unique to a privacy system, right? In most transaction protocols, most cryptocurrencies, you don't need to care about other people's transactions. You just care about your own. It doesn't work like that in a privacy-based system because you need to mingle your funds with everyone else's, not just a subset of everyone else's, but everyone else's funds maximally.
It's like the universal truth is it's all private. So you somehow have to have access to all of it.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we design the protocol so that, my phone doesn't download gigabytes of people's transaction history? And that's the core of what sits at the change in Tachyon, is embracing this recursive proof, evolving nullifier model for doing double spend prevention while allowing the validators to not store all the nullifiers, which is cool.
Have you followed any of the other kind of privacy constructions, like something like Aztec? Did they run into a similar issue of like having to have all of this global state be private and then it's sort of building up?
So a lot of teams that have been building like anonymous or private cryptocurrency things that are based on the zero cash construction or related to it, including Aztec, have explored over the years this exact problem and solutions to it. Zcash, like, we were thinking about ways to do this before we even launched Zcash using recursion. Even years before Halo was a thing, we were doing talks about it, like in Dara's talk, like I was saying. But like the Aztec folks, I remember reading a thread where they actually, like a long thread where they actually were like, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? And they thought of something similar to this for Aztec, where again you would actually do these off-chain proofs of like that you didn't spend your nullifiers, and then the validators wouldn't need to keep all the data around. The problem is that it was not private or required the client to download all this data. And so that was the problem we're trying to solve. Like, how do we do it and have this remote service do all the work for us while keeping it private? And that's sort of what we solved with this technique that we're using. As the Aztec folks, I think they probably came to the conclusion that this wasn't high priority. They needed to, ship, and it was more important to do that than to worry about a problem like this, which we're only worrying about like 10 years in. So I don't think they pursued it, but they definitely thought about it. This is our attempt at actually like fixing it and integrating it. So.
Cool. That's awesome. Would this, like the wallet, would the wallet have to run one of these off-chain workers somehow? Like, is this going to fall on the application's shoulders in a way to be able to read these?
Yeah, so there's different models. Like a lot of people who talk about zero knowledge and privacy and scalability when it comes to snarks, they talk about different blockchain models where like you can have the consensus nodes, validators, whatever you want to call them, they do as little as possible and they just check proofs, and then the client does all the proofs. And that can work to some extent. It's hard to make that private, but it can work to some extent. Then you can have this other model where you have like remote services sort of do work for your wallet, but you give up privacy to those remote services.
Yeah.
And they can go on, and that solves the scale problem to an extent for the network. And it's directionally similar to what we're trying to do. Problem is we're not trying to relinquish our privacy.
Any of the privacy. Yeah.
Right. Now, there's a hybrid model, which is what some people are working on. I think the mining people are working on using like NPCs and stuff, where you do give up your privacy, but under like an NPC-based model where you just assume
fully sending it to a central entity.
Yeah. This is only for a subset of the protocol that you would have to do that. The parts where you couldn't locally efficiently prove it, like for the double spend prevention. So in Zcash, we're trying to go the full privacy route, and we're trying to do the scalable route, which requires this new architecture to make it actually work. And that's pretty much the summary of the core of Tachyon, is just using recursive proofs to do that. And the fun part about it is that we're actually probably going to use Halo, like the original Halo construction for it. There's been a million different folding schemes that come up over the last several years that have improved things. But the original construction of Halo, with a couple tweaks with some papers that came out like a year after Halo came out, like split accumulation and some stuff like that, it fits our performance profile. So we don't need to use any of the really recent tech, and we still get basically the same like asymptotics that you get in some of the most recent constructions, which is kind of cool. So we actually kind of get to go back and say, yeah, we finally have the original Halo that's actually in Tachyon. That's kind of neat.
Very nice. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show, updating us about all of the sort of transitions you've made, the new work you've been doing, what's happened in Zcash over the last 5 years. I feel like there was so much to cover. I recently had Ian on, so that was a little insight into a lot of the history of Zcash and the trusted setup stuff that he was doing. We have our episode that I mentioned at the start, episode 76, where if anyone wants to find out more about you, we actually, I think, did a lot more backstory there, so I'm going to recommend that. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
No, it's always awesome to be on this podcast. Best podcast in crypto.
Thanks. All right. I want to say thank you to the podcast team, Rachel, Henrik, Hector, and Tanya, and to our listeners. Thanks for listening.